As I've been making these videos, I found myself really enjoying TikTok, just as a format. I go through, initially it was the science videos that I liked, but then it turned into like dancing videos and recipes and culture and all that other sort of stuff, especially this channel right here. So as the result, in an effort to kind of grow my brand, I figured I would share with you my favorite waffle recipe. But also I want to talk a little bit about convergent evolution. And maybe you guys can help me out. When you go to the Waffle House and you order waffles, they're the flatter kind, and they're broader, and they actually say Waffle House in the middle of there. And I've been looking for years for one of these things, but they really seem to keep them under wraps. They don't turn up ever, not even on eBay. So here's all the ingredients and the equipment you're going to need to use to make these waffles. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and plug in our waffle maker. Let's plug it in and get that thing heating up. And while that is warming up, I want you to take a look at these insects, and specifically the front legs of these insects. Now, most insect legs end with they have all these segments, this plated exoskeleton, but they end in this foot. And an insect foot is usually like a claw and a pad. And the pad is for walking on smooth surfaces, and the claw is to grab onto things while it's climbing up trees or any vertical surface. But if you look at all of these insects, the ends of those legs are spikes. And you'll notice that from the foot to the tibia, they actually form these clamps. And there's spikes, and there's all kinds of ugly things in there. Now, in entomology, we call this specialized leg raptorial. Think about like a raptor for the raptor birds or Jurassic Park raptors. Now, what if I told you that these legs, these insects, are not related to each other at all? That is to say that if you were to trace the parenthood of this insect back, all the way back a long ways, eventually they share a common ancestor. But these guys shared no common ancestor that had these raptorial claws. So it becomes evident that these raptorial claws evolved independently within each of these insect families. So this is a design by natural selection, and this design works effectively well at capturing other insect prey, because all of these insects are predatory. So in the evolutionary history of these guys, life was given a problem. And the problem was, we need a better way to grasp onto prey in order to capture and to eat the prey without it getting away. So in order to solve this problem, the ancestors of these insects pulled out basically the same toolkit. They were supplied with the same genetic toolkit. And then while they didn't spontaneously mutate and create a gene for raptorial legs, what it did was it pulled out a gene for making exoskeleton, and it pulled out another gene for where to attach the muscles. And eventually this thing kind of changed and eventually just became raptorial legs all on its own. And it happened multiple times within the evolution of the insects. Now, if I'm doing some of this wrong, I hope that somebody in the comments will tell me about it, because I consider myself a very confident cook, but not really a very good cook at all. Okay, I'm just making a big old mess here. In this bowl, I'm trying to mix the egg yolks and the butter and the milk, but I accidentally just cracked the whole egg in there before I realized I was supposed to separate it. So I've tried to recapture some of the whites and put them in there, but I don't know how good of a job I did. So here's our wet ingredients, here's our dry ingredients, and here's our egg whites with some milk mixed in, but we're not going to let that stop us. So it always says, the recipe says to blend, to mix the egg whites until the stiff ridges form. And I have to be honest with you, I've never understood what that means. But what I am going to do is I'm going to blend it up until it's frothy with this immersion blender. And so finally, we're going to take all of our ingredients and pour them into the big bowl and mix them all together. And there we have it. Now we're going to add the vanilla extract. There's a rule about vanilla extract where you're supposed to only put in like one little capful, but I really like vanilla, so I always put in more. And they always say that that's no good. Actually, more vanilla doesn't make it taste more vanilla-y, but that doesn't make any sense to me, so I don't do it. So we actually grow vanilla here in South Florida. It will grow in pretty much any tropical environment, but you'll never see Florida produced vanilla. And that's because it's not the growing the vanilla that's the problem, it's the pollination of the vanilla that's a problem. So vanilla is this orchid, and it grows in this tree, and it opens one big flower, but the flower is only open for like 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, and it has to be pollinated in that time, or it will make no vanilla bean. And here in South Florida, we don't have a bee that is capable of pollinating the vanilla. That bee lives in Mexico, where vanilla originated. So anytime you see vanilla produced outside of its native range in Mexico, it's all hand pollinated. Convergent evolution is when two different species develop a similar trait. And you might think that this is actually a pretty rare phenomenon, but it's not. It turns out this happens in nature all the time. Here you'll see a few insect examples. On the top is a walking stick, on the bottom is a stick grasshopper. Now they look very similar and they act very similar, but the truth is they're not related to one another at all, and this sort of camouflaged body shape evolved on its own. So if you started out as a land mammal and you eventually moved into an aquatic environment, you need a new way to get around. And it turns out that a flipper is one of the best ways to do that. And so we see flippers turn up all over the place. Sea turtles have a flipper that evolved from a leg. Penguins have a flipper, and that evolved from a wing. And finally, I've heard before, I've never seen, I don't know where the reference is, but I've heard that the eye has actually developed like 70 times in nature, completely separately. An eye is a complicated thing, but it turns out it has a relatively constant solution. What you need is a lens, and what you need is light-sensing cells. And you can put those together in the right way and make an eye. Okay, so we're finally ready to start making these waffles. So I'm going to open up our waffle maker, and I'm going to take some of this batter, and I'm going to pour it in.
Ahorita se te quita, yo sé que tú eres malita y quien te ve no me eres chiquita. Ay, 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 Lupita, así que sí, dame cinturita, así que sí, dame cinturita, sí, 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 dame cinturita. Ay, 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 Lupita, ay que sí, dame cinturita, ay que sí, dame cinturita, ay que sí, dame cinturita, ay que sí, dame, ay, Lupita, así que sí, dame cinturita, así que sí, dame cinturita, sí, 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 dame cinturita.
So here's the first waffle. Now, you might think that this is a functional waffle, but the truth is the first waffle is not a functional waffle at all. It is a practice waffle, and it is also a cleaner waffle, because it soaks up all the crud that was left in there from the last time you made your waffles.
Deja tu frescura, mami, ven y dame cintura, pa' que se vaya la rechura, se te dijo todo recogerlo en cura. Ay, se quiere bandido, y yo más que tú que soy bandido, tú atrás de mi comarido, ahora luego eso suena chido. Ey, tú di que prima es loca, ven pa' acá y abre la boca, que como tú que tan poca, no digas nada.
So sometimes convergent evolution doesn't seem like it at first. Like, let's take, for example, insects and human beings. Humans move, we get locomotion through muscles that are attached to bones, and the muscles expand and contract and expand and contract, and that's how we get movement. Now, insects might seem completely different, but the truth is the principle is the same. Insects, however, have their skeletons on the outside, so they have an exoskeleton. But they have very similar muscles to ours, and those similar muscles attach to the exoskeleton and expand and contract and expand and contract, and that's how insects move. So while they don't look anything alike, it's actually convergent evolution. It developed independently.
What we don't know.
For this section, I'm going way out on a limb here, but I want you to come with me. I'm a person who believes wholeheartedly that we are not alone in this universe. I believe that there is extraterrestrial life out there. Now, I don't believe in alien visitations and in abductions and government cover-ups. I don't believe any of that, but I do believe that we are not here all by ourselves. When I was a kid, and still today, I was absolutely obsessed with aliens. I would lay on the ground outside at nighttime and look up at the stars and just wonder about what is out there and where it is. Now, a lot of scientists and really smart people have wondered, if we were standing there and we were looking directly at alien life, we might not even recognize it as life at all. We might just recognize it as crystals or as rocks or just something we can't conceive of. Now, I've always loved science fiction, in particular alien science fiction, because I love to see how artists and other people conceive of what extraterrestrial life would look like. So all that said, if alien life were to be on another planet, I believe that it would still be subject to evolution through natural selection. And if we're going to use the Earth as an example, then a lot of times these solutions that life comes up with are convergent. They're the same solution to the same problem, but they arise separately. And I believe that we could easily see a lot of convergence between ourselves and aliens existing on another planet. For the rest of this video, I'm going to use locomotion as an example. I believe that life on another planet would also need to evolve some sort of locomotion, and that evolution would be driven by a natural selection. And if we're going to use Earth as an example, locomotion is also subject to a lot of convergence. You know, people and vertebrates, animals that all have spines and bones, usually use those bones as a system of levers, and that's how we do locomotion. That's how we get from one place to another. We also have species that live within a liquid environment, and those species always develop some sort of a fin, some sort of a way to use muscles to push themselves through the water. On Earth, we also see this like undulating foot. I'm thinking like a snail or a slug. The whole body is basically a foot, and it just kind of moves and works its way forward. And there are even animals that use siphons. Octopi and nautilus, they all have this system of siphoning, of collecting water and then squeezing it back out. And it's sort of like a hydraulic system. And in some insect nymphs, we see the same thing. This like pushing fluid from one side to another, and it kind of forces the insect or the grub or the worm, kind of pushes it forward. And I think we can also conceive of types of locomotion that does not happen on the Earth. Like, for example, there is no wheel in nature. We don't find any wheels or balls or rolling or that kind of thing. There's some things that are kind of close, but ultimately we don't really see that. And we might see that on a alien world. On a microscopic level here on Earth, we do have some organisms that get around using kind of like a propeller. It's this thing that actually spins, and it's attached to a long tube ultimately, and it spins that tube and eventually sort of works its way through its medium like a corkscrew. So as far as we know, the laws of physics apply pretty much the same here as they do in other places in the universe. So if a sea turtle develops a flipper to push itself through the water here on Earth, why wouldn't an alien use a flipper to do the same thing in a lake on another planet? So while aliens may also use some sort of locomotion that we don't have an example of, or that we can't even conceive of, we may also well see convergent evolution in between here and another planet. I'm afraid I got so excited about talking about aliens that I burnt a waffle. So here's the waffles. They turned out really dense. They're really heavy, and I'm not sure that this is the best batch that I've ever made.